Well, there's, once again, a lot to talk about when it comes to Eskom. Of course, with stage 4 load shedding underway at the moment until at least Friday. Now Eskom announcing a series of changes to the management, the people running the Koeberg nuclear power station. The utility's chief nuclear officer, Riedewaan Barkadien, is resigning to go to a job in Canada. The current acting manager at Koeberg, Nomawethu Mtwebana, is going to work for the World Association of Nuclear Operators. All of this happening while there's that big, huge refurbishment process, which is supposed to be underway for Unit 2 at Koeberg. Becker is from the Koeberg Alert Alliance Group. I must just tell you that he was also fired from his position on the board of the National Nuclear Regulator by the Energy Minister, Riedewaan Barkadien. He's currently fighting that suspension in court. Peter, good afternoon to you. This is two big management changes during quite a tricky time for Koeberg. At the same time, there's a lot going on around Koeberg. Is this going to have an impact on this process?
Hi, Stephen. Well, I think firstly, it's good to mention it's not so much a management change, but a loss of management, right? No replacements have been announced for those two people. And this is also part of quite an ongoing trend. If we think back to 2021, when the COO of Eskom said he found that there was a shocking loss of technical staff from Koeberg. We also had a plant manager suspended in that year. Earlier this year, the CEO of the National Nuclear Regulator resigned, also no replacement, and now we have these two people resigning. And this is an ongoing trend, and I think it would be naive to expect it's the last people who leave. And this is a concern from two different aspects. One is cost, and the other is safety. Because obviously, as you say, during such an important phase of work at the plant, it's important to have skilled people there. But also there are potentially cost implications. So the last attempt to replace the steam generators failed because the plant wasn't ready for it. And according to a statement from NUM, there was a R1 billion penalty charged to Eskom for that. So this is a concern for multiple reasons.
So just to be clear, from what you're saying, what you're quoting the National Union of Mine Workers is suggesting, is that because of what would have been a failure by management in some way, this cost Eskom R1 billion to get nothing.
Correct. And if you think about it, that sounds like a lot. But if you're talking about a top international team of nuclear engineers who have allocated months to come and do work in this country, and they arrive, they book the travel, the accommodation, they book themselves off other work, and then they're told to go home because they can't do the work, it's not that surprising that there would be a large bill for such a mistake.
Surely someone would be held accountable for that.
Well, I was about to say that, and I think that's an excellent question. Unfortunately, we haven't heard that. I did ask Eskom a while back if they were going to do an investigation into it. They said yes, but the report of that investigation they don't plan to make public. And I think that's probably a problem that extends to areas apart from Eskom, is a lack of an accountability when this kind of expensive mistake is made.
A lot's going on in electricity issues around the world at the moment for various reasons. Part of it's the pandemic, part of it's just what's happening with fuel prices, part of it's to do with how the world is re-gearing itself. I would imagine that means that in the nuclear energy industry there's a lot of movements as well. Aren't the people who are leaving just part of that? I mean, they're part of an international industry.
Yeah, I think things are being shaken up all over the world. The oil price and gas prices because of the Ukraine situation is one example of that. But I think if you can it's not hard to imagine working for Eskom at the moment, and it's not a very fulfilling place to be. You come under a lot of criticism from your friends, from your family, and to work in such an ineffective organization must be very, very frustrating. And what's most frightening to me is to think, who are the people who leave first? Or who are the people who are headhunted first? Obviously, it's the most competent people. So if this is a trend that's going to continue, it's frightening to think what we might be left with at Koeberg. And at the moment, Koeberg is meant to come to the end of its life in 2024, so that might not be such a concern, at least not for a long term. But Eskom is talking about extending that for another 20 years. So it's a major concern whether we will have the skilled staff available to handle not only the refurbishment, but the extended life of that plant.
Do you expect, I mean, what we need is as much electricity as possible. We need to get it as safely as possible. Koeberg obviously is a big part of that. It produces quite a lot of electricity. It does it relatively cheaply, Peter, I should mention. Do you expect that we are going to still be using Koeberg for quite a long time and that it will be safe to do that?
Well, that's the question, and I think it's time for an independent, in-depth risk and benefit analysis of the plant. We are busy with some modeling to try and work out what the cost of electricity will be once this refurbishment is done. And Eskom estimated in 2010 that it would cost 20 billion rand to do the refurbishment. At the moment, it seems a realistic estimate is somewhere around 25 billion. As you mentioned, or as we mentioned, the 1 billion penalty has come out of nowhere, so that cost is likely to escalate. And if you take that and the current cost or the weighted cost of capital for Koeberg, for Eskom to refurbish Koeberg, we're looking at over 1 rand per kilowatt hour by 2025 for the electricity from Koeberg. So I think it's quite questionable that it's one of the cheapest sources around, especially given that renewables are somewhere in the region of 50 cents a kilowatt hour at the moment.
You know where
it depends.
I mean, you'll know where the argument goes, Peter. If we need base load electricity, well, then nuclear is the way. If we want electricity that doesn't affect the climate, well, nuclear is the way. I know you will disagree with me when I say that, and you'll know that's not my view. I'm just making the argument.
Absolutely. So I think firstly, let's look at context and scale. Koeberg is nominally 3.5% of national generating capacity. It's about 1.8 gigawatts of power. So that's not very much in the big scale, especially when you think about we're going to lose 11 to 20 gigawatts of coal as we move to an emission-free generating system. So it's not as if it's a major portion of our electricity supply. On that wonderful subject of baseload, it's really an outdated way of talking. And the moment you say the word load and you describe a generation as a type of load, you can see immediately where the problem is. A generation is not a load. Therefore, a generation plant can't be a base load plant, right? Load is what people are using, and there's a certain base load of that. But the concept that we have to have a certain type of plant to service a certain type of load is outdated. And now we have facilities to have storage, smart grids, demand-side management, curtailment, and all sorts of other tools which can allow us to use variable renewable energy plus storage to easily fulfill the needs of our electricity.
A lot's changing in this area. I mean, you and I know many others see just, renewable electricity as the way things are going to go. But isn't there still going to be space for some nuclear capacity? And if we already have a facility at Koeberg, shouldn't we keep it rather than build something new?
Well, that comes down to cost. So if the cost is really going to be 25 billion, we should look at what else can we spend 25 billion on, right? It's irrational to simply spend money on everything without doing some kind of analysis of that. And if we look at past track record of Eskom, it would be quite unrealistic to think they're going to stick to their cost estimate. It's not unusual for large projects like Medupi to double or even triple based on what the original estimates were. So if this 20 billion that Eskom has estimated doubles to 40 billion or to 50 billion, then the question really is it worth it? And what could we get for that amount of money if we spent it elsewhere?
Peter Becker, thank you very much indeed from the Koeberg Alert Alliance there. Of course, how complicated the conversation around electricity in our future can be. Peter, thank you.